Okay, we're going to get started. It's about 6 o'clock. So I just want to welcome everyone on behalf of the State Public Affairs Committee and Junior League of San Diego. We are very excited to have this event tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our Bubbles and Ballots event where we go over all the propositions that are going to be coming up on the ballot just to educate ourselves more so we have a better idea of what to vote on. And we also are going to be going over all the ways to vote this year since it's kind of a different year. So just wanted to welcome everyone. And normally we have this held at our house at 210 Maple, but we are able to do it this way this year, which is great. And actually we're going to be able to have a lot more people participate, which is even better. So just wanted to share the agenda for tonight. So we're going to have some opening remarks by Andrea Myers, who's our Junior League of San Diego president, as well as Elo Newcomb, who is our executive vice president of Junior League of San Diego. We'll then do a review of the 2020 election voting options and process. And we wanted to welcome Mary Leiden from League of Women Voters, who's going to be doing our ballot proposition review. And we'll be having a Q&A afterwards in case people have questions. You can submit those through the Q&A or the chat feature, and we'll be funneling those questions to Mary following her presentation. And then we'll have our closing. So I'll turn it over to Andrea and Elo. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Great, thanks team. Well, we are so excited to have everyone here today. We were just chatting as this was starting, and we hear that there are over 135 people who are on the call today. So that's amazing. I think that really goes to how important these issues are today. I just wanted to start off by recognizing that this year is the centennial celebration of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. And that provides that the right of citizens in the US to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the US or by any state on account of sex. So our league is really excited to be able to celebrate this milestone and build upon the momentum as we continue to honor the legacy of all those history-making women that came before us. So just by way of quick history, the fight for the right to vote began as early as 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York, and continued for 72 years. And women leaders, including those in the Junior League, importantly, lobbied and marched and picketed and protested for the right to vote. And it was the Junior League of St. Louis that was the first league to adopt women's suffrage as a league issue. And so those members walked in local parades, sponsored lectures, wrote letters, held meetings in their homes, and even traveled to Washington, D.C. to march in national events. So we have a very, very great history, and it's exciting to be able to celebrate that now. And while we celebrate the impact of today, we also want to acknowledge that this right wasn't granted to all women for another 45 years, when in 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act to overcome the barriers that prevented African American women from exercising their right to vote. So with this history in mind, we are very excited to have this conversation today. I think it's going to help inform all of us, and it really is a great celebration of our right to vote, and hopefully one that we all plan on exercising. So Elo, I will kick it off to you.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you to Junior League of San Diego's State Public Affairs Committee, or SPAC, as we so lovingly refer to them as in shorthand. I also want to thank the League of Women Voters for helping put on this incredibly educational evening. Bubbles and Ballots has become a very much anticipated and beloved event that happens. And so thank you for continuing this tradition, especially in light of the virtual scenario. So thank you for making this happen this year. What we learned tonight is fundamental to fulfilling our civic duty of voting as American citizens, a right that is not shared universally in other countries, and it is core to our democratic principles. However, for a democracy to work, citizens have to be engaged participants. In 2016, only 58% of eligible voters voted in the presidential election. That's not super great. To put that into perspective, that's slightly more than half of our nation's voters determining the outcomes on the issues at the federal, state, and local levels. That's only half of our voters electing officials, deciding our sheriff, our mayor, school board representatives, and even our president. For democracy to truly be of the people and for the people, citizens need to get involved, and voting is the most foundational ways to do that. Thank you for all being here tonight and taking part in the process of shaping our community and our country. So following this meeting, I challenge all of us to share what we have learned tonight with our friends, our families, and neighbors, and help them to understand the issues and help get them to the polls as well. Thank you again for putting this on. I have my pen and my paper ready to take a lot of notes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Andrea and Elo for starting off the evening, and also for the bubbles portion. We just wanted to do a toast, and although it would be much nicer to do that in person as a group, we just wanted to toast together and just cheers to educating ourselves and exercising our right to vote. And I hope you guys are all enjoying whatever beverage you enjoy this evening.
Cheers.
Cheers. So we're going to start out with some information for voting, because as we've all heard, there is a lot of talk going on, and there are a few different options for this year. So we'll be going through that just so everyone has an understanding of what your options are as a voter. So the first part is that you need to prepare to vote. So you want to check your registration information, confirm that all your information is correct. If you still need to register, you can still do that. Or if you need to re-register, if you have moved or changed your name, you can make any changes to your ballot, and you want to do that ASAP. And I want to thank Stephanie from our committee for making these very nice vote QR codes. So if you hold those up, that will give you a direct link to the websites we're referencing tonight. So if you want to capture those, that's available. So here's what it looks like to go to the registration site. You can register to vote now right here, or you can check your registration status, and you can check a variety of things: if you're registered, where you're registered to vote, your political party preference, find your polling place. So this is a great resource just to check your status and make sure that everything is as it should be. So again, that's a good website to go just to make sure that you are ready to go. And once you're registered to vote, you have two options this year. You can register by mail. Each registered voter will receive a ballot by mail this year, so you do have to be registered. And you also have the option of voting in person, so that's still available to you during this 2020 election. If you choose to vote by mail, a mail-in ballot, instructions, and I voted sticker will be mailed to all registered voters starting October 5th. Once you receive your ballot, you can complete it and choose all of your selections. When you're ready to mail your ballot in, you need to seal your completed ballot in the postage paid envelope. Be sure to sign it, date it, and return it by mail promptly so it is received well before Election Day in case there is an abundance of mail received. It is important to note that your signature is required for your ballot to count, so make sure you do sign the envelope, and you do need to sign your name like it appears on your driver's license or ID card, so make sure that the signatures do match in order for it to be counted. There's also a great website where you can track your ballot. It's called Where's My Ballot? So if you're concerned about putting it in the mail and not being sure where it ends up, you can go to this website and register your ballot and be able to track it through the process. There's another QR code there, so if you want to capture this website. So if you go to Where's My Ballot, you can follow these 4 easy steps and track your mail ballot every step of the way. So maybe that will provide some reassurance to people to make sure their mail-in ballot does get received and counted. So you can go to this website and sign up for that if that's something that is interesting for you. Okay, now voting in person. There will be fewer locations than in the past elections, so your polling place has most likely changed for this year. You might want to make sure to take advantage of early voting. So there's some options for locations for in-person voting and drop-off this year. The first option is a registrar's office. You can vote there starting in October, and their location is at 5600 Overland Avenue. They're available every day from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and you can start to vote there starting next week. You can also vote at your assigned polling place, which will be on the ballot that you receive, or at the registrar's office. They're going to have what's called super polls, so they're having them available 4 days before the election. October 31st to November 2nd, and those polls will be open from 8 to 5. So you can go in person before Election Day and vote as you would on Election Day. Or you can wait till Election Day and go to your assigned polling place or the registrar's office, and the hours are there as well. There's also several ballot drop-off locations that are available between October 6th and November 3rd. So if you go to this website, it will give you a list of all of the mail ballot drop-off locations. If you'd feel better just dropping it off directly, you can do that too. There's many options here in the San Diego area. So if you feel more comfortable dropping it off, there is an option for that too. If you're voting in person, here are some tips. So plan ahead and expect the possibility of long lines. You want to make sure to plan, make sure you go to your assigned polling place. You can find your assigned polling place on the back of your sample ballot and voter information pamphlet, or you can look it up online on that registration website we referred to in the beginning. You want to be prepared, mark your selections on your sample ballot and voter information pamphlet in advance so you can quickly fill in the official ballot in the voting booth. It's to be noted that older adults or people with underlying medical conditions should avoid long lines in crowded polling places so you can vote early by taking advantage of some of the early voting options. Be sure to bring your face mask and plan to maintain social distance. And it's also important to refrain from wearing any political attire to polling stations or directly outside of the polling stations as well. So we'll just go ahead and review the important dates coming up for the dates for the 2020 election. Again, there's a QR code here if you want to capture this. So October 5th begins early voting at the registrar's office, and that's available again Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. This is also a day that ballots will be mailed to registered voters. Starting October 6th, mail ballot drop-off locations are open through November 3rd. October 19th is a very important day. That's the last day you can register to vote. So if you haven't registered yet, keep that date in mind and try to get it in before that time so you're allowed to vote in this election. October 31st is the start of the super polls, which are open October 31st through November 2nd. And of course, November 3rd is election day. So, and then December 3rd is the certification of the election. So if you want to review these dates, that's available by the QR code here as well. Here are some good resources. Just if you're looking for more information, we have the San Diego Registrar of Voters. Rock the Vote has some good information, as well as USA.gov has nationwide voting information as well. So I just wanted to give you a recap of all of your voting options. If you have any questions, you can save those for when we do the Q&A at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I want to again welcome the League of Women Voters. Thank you for collaborating with us and teaching us all about the ballot propositions for this election. Mary Leiden has graciously offered her time to educate us on all the propositions, and we look forward to hearing from her. So I'm going to exit here so Mary can share her screen.
Is that going? Oh, there we go. Am I on?
Yes, I think I see it, yep.
Okay, great. Well, it's my pleasure to be here tonight. And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
If you have trouble hearing me, let me know and I'll turn off my video so that I have more bandwidth for the presentation. Well, first of all, I want to say, Junior League, you guys rock. Way to set this up and educate your membership. That was just an excellent introduction. And really, this is something that needs to be happening all across this country every time there's an election. This is our responsibility and our honor to participate in our process in this country, in our democracy. And it may feel like things are a little wild and woolly these days, but the way that I choose to look at it is that we are really resetting democracy in this country for the 21st century. And it's really catalyzing people into action, as it should be. So kudos to all of you for taking the time to be here and to listen. It's a lot of information. In some ways, it's almost another language. And I've been studying this and doing a couple of talks so far. And I've spent maybe 12 hours, and it's really just starting to sink in now. But I hope that the way that this presentation is organized will help you understand more deeply what's before us. And I'm thinking it might be easier if you had questions after each one than going back after I'm all done. So that's just for your consideration. So let's get going here. The League of Women Voters. We were founded in 1920, and we're celebrating 100 years this year. We're a nonpartisan organization, and we never support or oppose political parties or candidates. It really creates for a conversation to look at all sides. I want to direct your attention to some other voting resources for you, specific to the propositions and ballot measures, Voter's Edge, Easy Voter Guide, SD Vote, and of course the Women League of Voters. These are all really good resources if you want to dive in a little deeper to get some more information that's not part of the information you'll receive tonight or in other reading that you might be doing through the media or on your own. These are really good resources. I'll also be happy to share this PowerPoint so that it can be shared with all of you. So what do we look at when we're evaluating ballot propositions? And we'll look at each one of these as we move through this presentation tonight. So we need to understand, what does it do? How does it change existing law? Who benefits? How much does it cost and who pays for it? Who supports or opposes? And who's paying to support or oppose? So we'll look at each one of those things for every proposition and measure. How does a California state proposition, what does it do and how does it get on the ballot? Proposed laws are presented to the public, which make new laws, change existing laws, or change California's constitution. And it's placed on the ballot by two methods. One is a collection of voter signatures. It's called a citizens initiative. And the other is placed on the ballot by state lawmakers, and that's a legislative referral. This year, 4 of the propositions were placed on the ballot by the state legislature, and you'll see those as we move through which ones they are. 7 of them were placed by supporters who gathered sufficient signatures, so that's a lot. And 1 is a referendum that seeks to overturn an appeal to a proposed law. It's a little tricky, but we'll get into it when we get there. All of the propositions require a simple majority to pass, 50% plus 1. There are 12 propositions this year that require our vote. They range from healthcare and voting rights to property taxes and rent control. There's also 5 measures if you live in the city of San Diego, and we'll go over each one of these. All of these were placed on the ballot by the city council. They went through the whole city council committee process, and then the council voted to place it on the ballot. So let's dive into our state propositions, starting with Proposition 14. This authorizes bonds continuing stem cell research. It was a citizens-initiated statute, and it was put forward by Robert Klein, who's the chairman of the Independent Citizens Oversight Committee of the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine. What would Prop 14 do? It permits the state to borrow $5.5 billion to fund grants from the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine. It funds stem cell research, therapy and development, medical training, and construction of research facilities. And it dedicates $1.5 billion to the research and therapy for brain and nervous system issues. And it limits the bond issuance to $540 million per year. So how did it get on the ballot? In 2004, the voters approved a $3 billion bond for stem cell research. And it has, there's been a number of projects and trials that have moved forward, and that money is almost spent. And so the original backers are now looking for more bond dollars to continue their research. What's the fiscal bottom line? $7.8 billion is the total estimated cost, which the state would repay at an estimated average of about $260 million per year over the next roughly 30 years. Now, the cost could be offset by a provision that requires a percentage of the income from the new inventions that result from bond money research. It's not a lot of money, but this same provision for Prop 71's bond measure in 2004 recouped $350,000. Supporters' arguments include nearly half of all California families include someone who could benefit from stem cell research, treatments, and cures. The original stem cell funding has led to significant treatments and cures, including 92 FDA-approved clinical trials and over 2,900 medical discoveries. New revenues, economic activity, and jobs have generated that will contribute to the California's economic recovery and will only cost an average of less than $5 per person annually. There are hundreds of organizations and individuals that support Prop 14, including leadership from the American Cancer Research, the American Diabetes Association, and the Department of Medicine at Stanford. Over $6 million has been raised to support this, having this proposition on the ballot. Now, the opponents are saying that this wastes billions of dollars in the middle of an economic crisis with soaring unemployment. It funds a bureaucracy with serious problems, and some have questioned the integrity and independence of the state agency overseeing these funds. Others can do this job better, such as the National Institute of Health or private investors and companies. Prop 14 means higher taxes, layoffs, or both. Paying back costs could even mean huge tax increases or laying off thousands of nurses and other heroes who do the real work of keeping California healthy. Opponents include Vince Fortasse, a physician, Patrick Baggett, also a physician, and the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. We don't have any money on what has been spent to oppose this. For Prop 14, a yes vote means the state could sell $5.5 billion in general obligation bonds, primarily for stem cell research and the development of new medical treatments in California. A no vote means that the state could not sell these bonds. So there, we made it through our first proposition, and that's the flow that we'll use for each proposition moving forward.
So Mary, we have two questions for this prop if you're available for that. Okay, so the first question, is there a breakdown available of how much of the 5.5 billion would go to research, therapy, and development versus construction of facilities?
You know, I do not have that information. And I would refer you to the one of the ballot websites. Ballotpedia is one that I always go to. They dive in pretty deep, and they can probably uncover that kind of information.
Okay, next question for Prop 14. Does it include any language specifically regarding embryonic stem cell research?
That is a very good question, and I also do not know the answer. So encourage you to go to those resources that have the comprehensive information.
Okay, and then last question, what is the correlation between the $5 billion per year annually, $5 per year annually per citizen and the argument of huge tax hikes?
Well, that people have to pay $5 a year. That's an increase to our taxes. And if we had 20 propositions that increased our taxes, you know, at the end of the year, we might be looking at increase of taxes every time we have an election, in hundreds of dollars per person. So it's a way, that's just a way of saying it seems like a small amount, but certainly collectively, we have to balance out how much we're willing to pay in increased taxes.
Okay, sorry, there was two more questions. Does a yes vote mean they could sell the bonds or will sell the bonds?
They can sell the bonds.
Okay, and one more. Can the prop provide money to both pharma companies who do stem cell research and research institutions such as UCSD?
My apologies, I do not know.
Okay, thank you for the information. We'll also give you a couple of resources at the end for where you can find more info on each specific prop if you have questions that you want to dive more into. So are we ready to move on to the next one? I don't think there's any more questions for 14, so we'll go on to the next one.
Proposition 15 increases funding sources for public schools, community colleges, and local government services by changing assessment of commercial and industrial property. This was a citizens-initiated constitutional amendment. And it was forwarded by the Coalition of Community Organizations. You probably have seen a lot of commercials for this. It's very, very controversial. So what would Prop 15 do? It amends Proposition 13, which was voted on in 1978 by changing property assessment for commercial and industrial properties and reassessing them to market value periodically, beginning in 2022. There are no changes for residential properties nor for agricultural properties. And there's benefits to small businesses. Small businesses are exempt from reassessment if property is valued at $3 million or less. It's exempt from personal property tax if they have fewer than 50 employees. And all other businesses are exempt from personal property tax on the first $500,000 of their personal property, regardless of size. So under Prop 13, this is how it got on the ballot. Property is reassessed for property tax purposes upon the sale or transfer of a property and is limited to 2% annual increase. Because the value of the property has typically increased much faster than 2% per year, the assessed value of most property in the state is less than its market value. This is particularly true for commercial and industrial property, which changes ownership less often than residential property. Citizens groups obtained signatures twice for this ballot measure, amending the proposition to create greater benefits for small businesses. So what's the fiscal bottom line? Proposition 15 would produce about $6.5 to $11.5 billion per year in additional property tax revenue for local services. The revenue would be distributed first to the state to supplement decreases in revenue from the state's personal income tax and corporation tax due to increased tax deductions, and counties to cover, and then the counties' cost would go to reimburse the counties to cover the costs of implementing the measure. The balance would be divided 40% for schools and 60% for community services. Supporters say that Prop 15 is a fair and balanced reform that closes property tax loopholes that benefit wealthy corporations while giving tax breaks to small businesses to help our economy grow. It provides billions in new revenue for our communities and schools and requires full transparency in how the money is spent. 10% of the wealthiest businesses will provide more than 90% of this revenue. It keeps Prop 13's protection for homeowners, renters, and farms. And there are over 300 organizations and 600 elected and appointed officials who support this measure, including the League of Women Voters California, the California Teachers Association, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and SEIU. Over $20 million has been raised to support this proposition. Opponents say that Proposition 15 would trigger the largest property tax increase in California's history. The additional cost will ultimately raise prices for consumers and will make it harder for people to start small businesses. It will require a huge cost to administer. Opponents include the California Business Roundtable, the California Taxpayers Association, and the California Farm Bureau Federation. Over $5 million has been raised in opposition to date. So a yes vote on Prop 15 means that property taxes on most commercial properties worth more than $3 million will go up in order to provide new funding to local governments and schools. A no vote means large commercial properties would continue to be reassessed only upon sale or transfer. A couple questions on this?
Yes, so the first question for Prop 15, if Prop 15 passes, would a residential property that is being rented out still be considered residential, or does it become commercial? Could Prop 15 raise property taxes for residential landlords?
Well, it's the property owner who owns rentals, that is considered a business. So the number of, there's small apartment owner businesses, and then there's very large apartment owner businesses. An apartment owner who has value under $3 million, their assessments would not change. An apartment owner who has more than $3 million in apartment buildings or within their business, no, apartment buildings, they would be reassessed on more of a regular basis, and their taxes would go up.
Okay, and then the second question, in what way would this prop be expensive to administer?
I believe they need to set up a new system within the state that would monitor this. So that would mean hiring staff and setting up systems to collect those taxes and then to disperse them.
Okay, if passed, since corporations are footing the tax bill, would corporations then want to move out of state, or would they then need to lay off employees to offset the cost?
That is a possibility.
Okay, if that's the case in terms of large apartment complexes, is there anything in place to protect rents from skyrocketing as a result of the increase?
Well, the market really defines what the rent will be. And so rents do go up over time, but it has to be what the market will bear.
Okay, and then there's one quick question from the previous Prop 14 that we forgot to do. Is Prop 14, is this a private funder looking for taxpayer support of stem cell research?
Well, it's for the Regenerative Medicine Center. So there is the director of that center put this measure on the ballot and got enough votes to do that and enough funding to pay for it to get it on the ballot. So it's a citizens initiative.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that have popped up for 15.
Okay, very good. On to 16. 16 allows diversity as a factor in public employment, education, and contracting decisions. This is a legislative constitutional amendment, and it required a 2/3 yes vote in the legislature to make it to the ballot. So what would Prop 16 do? It repeals the section of the California Constitution introduced by Prop 209 in 1996. It eliminates the ban on the consideration of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in a public education, public employment, and public contracting. One moment, please. Little noise in my backyard, my apologies. So this Prop 16 eliminates the ban on the consideration of race, sex, color, and ethnicity, or national origin in public education, public employment, and public contracting. State and local entities could establish a wider range of policies and programs so long as they are consistent with federal and state law related to equal protection. So how did this get on the ballot? In 1996, California voters approved Proposition 209, which generally banned affirmative action. Public entities in California have policies and programs to instead consider characteristics not banned by Prop 209 in order to increase diversity. Federal law allows policies and programs that consider certain characteristics to increase diversity within limits. Prop 209 is more restrictive than federal law. Legislature put Prop 16 on ballot in light of recent movement against racial injustice. What's the fiscal bottom line? Prop 16 would have no direct fiscal effect on the state and local entities because the measure would not require any change to current policies or programs. State and local entities could make any number of decisions about policies and programs that consider race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin. Because these specific decisions are unknown, the potential fiscal effects are highly uncertain. Supporters argue that Prop 16 means equal opportunities for all Californians. Despite living in the most diverse state in the nation, women and people of color currently are still discriminated against. We're at a historic moment and need to strengthen California by overturning discrimination in all areas. Supporters include League of Women Voters of California, San Diego County Democratic Party, Senators Harris and Feinstein, Governor Newsom, Mayor Kevin Faulconer from the city of San Diego, and Kaiser Permanente. Over $3 million has been raised to support this measure. Opponents argue that Prop 16 would be a step backward, introducing a new form of discrimination to favor politicians' favorites. Let's not perpetuate the stereotypes that minorities and women can't make it unless they get special preferences. Prop 16 will require costly bureaucracies to enforce its provisions, burdening taxpayers. Opponents include former UC Board of Regents member Ward Connerly, USD Professor of Law Gail Harriet, former US Congressman Tom Campbell, and StopProp16.org campaign. Over 100,000 has been raised in opposition. So yes vote would allow public colleges, universities, and agencies to include race, sex, color, ethnicity, and country of origin as part of their decision making. And I want to say the operative word is would allow. It's not mandated. They would be allowed to create affirmative action programs to increase diversity or to help certain groups. A no vote means the current ban on the consideration of race, sex, color, ethnicity, and national origin in public education, public employment, and public contracting would remain in effect. Did any questions come forward for Prop 16?
There was one about, does this prop put back affirmative action, but I think you just answered it in the, what a yes vote means.
Okay, great. Prop 17. This restores right to vote after completion of prison term. This is a legislative constitutional amendment initiated by Assembly Member Kevin McCarty. It required a 2/3 yes vote in the legislature to make it to the ballot. What would Prop 17 do? It amends the California Constitution to restore voting rights to persons who have been released from prison and are on parole. Those on parole would be able to register to vote and participate in elections. Those eligible to register to vote may also run for elective offices if qualified. How did this get on the ballot? In 2016, California passed legislation allowing those in county jails to vote while incarcerated, but not those in state and federal prison. Prop 17 is the outcome of the Assembly Constitutional Amendment and Assembly Bill 646. These are two bills that successfully passed through the California legislature in 2020. Legislature voted to place ACA 6 on the ballot as a constitutional amendment. California would join 16 states and Washington, D.C., who automatically restore voting rights to those who complete their prison sentences, including those on parole. The fiscal bottom line, annual costs would likely be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars statewide, administered at county levels. Potentially increases the number of people who can vote in elections, and thus increasing the ongoing workload for county election officials. It creates a one-time workload for state to update voter registration systems, likely resulting in a one-time state cost in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So supporters say that nearly 50,000 Californians who have completed their prison sentences pay taxes at the local, state, and federal levels. However, they are not able to vote at any level of government. When a person completes their prison sentence, they should be encouraged to re-enter society and have a stake in their community. A Florida study found that people who have completed their prison sentences and had their voting rights restored were less likely to commit crimes in the future. 19 other states allow people to vote once they have successfully completed their prison sentences. Supporters include the League of Women Voters of California, Jay Jordan, Californians for Safety and Justice, and Kevin McCarty, Assembly Member and the author for Prop 17. Over $400,000 raised to support this measure. Opponents argue that Prop 17 will allow convicted criminals of violent crimes to vote before completing their sentence, which includes parole. People convicted of non-violent felonies are incarcerated in county jails and have the right to vote while serving their sentences. Parole is to prove rehabilitation before full liberty, including voting rights, is restored. If the state does not trust them to choose where to live or travel, with whom to associate, and what jobs to do, it must not trust them with decisions that will impact the lives and finances of other members of society. Opponents include Harriet Salerno from the Crime Victims United of California, Jim Nielsen, California Board of Prison Terms, and Ruth Weiss, Election Integrity Project California. We don't have data on their fundraising. So Prop 17 yes vote means that people are on state parole who are U.S. citizens, residents of California, and at least 18 years of age would be able to vote if they register to vote. A no vote means that people on state patrol would continue to be unable to vote. Any questions?
We'll give it a minute to see if anyone posts any for this. Okay, looks like we can move on to the next one.
Proposition 18 permits 17-year-olds to vote in primary and special elections if they will turn 18 by the next general election. This is a legislative constitutional amendment. It required a 2/3 vote in the legislature to make the ballot. Prop 18 permits 17-year-olds to vote in a primary or special election, but only if they will turn 18 before the general election in the same election cycle and are otherwise qualified to vote. Because these 17-year-olds would be lawfully registered voters, they would be permitted to run for office if they otherwise qualify as well. How did this get on the ballot? This proposed constitutional amendment was put on the ballot by the legislature. Engaging young voters has been a concern for some time, and the rationale behind this proposal is to incentivize youth participation by allowing them to vote in both the primary and the general election in the same election cycle. Having the opportunity to be involved in choosing which candidates will compete in an upcoming election could motivate young people to take the next step and also vote in the general election. Fiscal bottom line is that it could cost hundreds of dollars for counties across California every 2-year election cycle to pay for both extra voting materials and staff time. There's a one-time cost of several hundreds of thousands of dollars to the state in order to provide support for this change, including updating voter registration systems. But the total cost would be less than 1% of the state's general fund budget. Supporters argue that Prop 18 would allow 17 and 18-year-olds to participate in a full election cycle. It will increase participation in the electoral process among young people. And because so many public policies directly impact the lives of young people, many of whom do work and pay taxes, they should be allowed to vote. This measure would promote the habit of voting, which evidence shows increases the likelihood of voting in the future. In other words, voting is habit forming. Supporters include Assemblymember Mullen and Lowe and the California Democratic Party. Almost $100,000 was raised in support. Opponents say that 17-year-olds who do not pay property taxes should not be able to vote on bond issues involving taxes and public debt. 17-year-olds lack the maturity to vote and need more life experience. And they could be easily influenced by their teachers, who would tend to advocate for certain propositions, particularly school bond measures. And 17-year-old brains have not yet fully developed when it comes to logic and reason. Opponents include Election Integrity Project of California, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and the Republican Party of San Diego County. We don't have data on any money that they raised in opposition. So a yes vote for Prop 18 means that young people who will turn 18 by the time of the general election should be able to vote in the primary of the same election cycle, even if they're only 17. A no vote means only those who have turned 18 can vote in any California election.
Okay, we have, do any other states have these provisions?
Good question. You guys are stumping me all over the place. I don't know. That'll be one for Ballotpedia.
Any other questions for Prop 18? We're going to be circling back at the end, so if you think of questions along the way, you'll have another chance to ask them as well.
Thank you. Prop 19 changes tax assessment transfers and inheritance rules. This is a legislative constitutional amendment. It was placed on the ballot by the legislature after a citizens' initiative was withdrawn. It had required 2/3 majority vote to make the ballot. What would Prop 19 do? It allows eligible homeowners to transfer a property's taxable value to a more expensive home anywhere in the state, up to 3 times in a lifetime. It still allows once in a lifetime transfers for victims of wildfires and natural disaster. It eliminates the transfer of taxable values of inherited properties unless the heirs live in the property as a principal residence or a farm. It used increased state tax revenue from Prop 19 in a statewide fire suppression effort and reimburses, the taxes, this is just worded funny. The taxes are used to fight fire suppression efforts and reimbursement of county costs. So how did this get on the ballot? Currently, homeowners in special groups, such as people over 55, can buy a new home without paying higher property taxes in some counties once in their lifetime, if their new home is not more expensive than their existing home. Inherited property rules allow some transfers to heirs without resetting the taxable value, with no requirement to reside there. Both of those aspects are part of Prop 13, which we talked about earlier, which ends up discouraging sales of property. The California Association of Realtors launched an initiative campaign in 2019 to revisit their failed Prop 5 measure, which was put forward in 2018. The legislature drafted a compromise version with provisions for fire suppression, for funding fire suppression. So what's the fiscal bottom line? Revenue loss from transfer for homeowners over 55 more than offset by increased revenue from inherited property. Yield local governments and schools tens of millions of dollars per year, growing to a few $100 million per year. Increased home sales could generate transfer tax and state income tax in the tens of millions of dollars each year. State administration costs are expected to be in the tens of millions of dollars each year. And this will allocate additional revenue or savings resulting from the measure to be used for fire suppression efforts. Supporters argue that Prop 19 expands Prop 13 rules for homeowners who are seniors, wildfire victims, or people with disabilities, and allows the transfer of their home's property tax value to replacement homes anywhere in California. It closes tax loopholes on inherited properties not used as primary residences, directing increased tax revenue to fire protection, schools, and local government. So there's 150 organizations and officials who support this, including the California Association of Realtors, the National Association of Realtors, and the California Professional Firefighters. $35 million plus has been raised in support of this proposition. Opponents argue that the California Constitution was amended 3 times to protect the right of families to pass their home and up to $1 million of other property to their heirs without changing the Prop 13 assessment. Reassessment to market value will force families to sell their property because they cannot afford higher property taxes. There are 8 organizations and officials that are opponents: the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, Senator Patricia Bates, and Assemblyman Ken Cooley. $45,000 was raised in opposition. A yes vote for Prop 19 means all homeowners who are over 55 or who meet other qualifications, like their home was burned in a fire, would be eligible for property tax savings when they move. Only inherited properties used as primary homes or farms would be eligible for property tax savings. A no vote means some homeowners who are 55 or over would continue to be eligible for property tax savings when they move. All inherited properties would continue to be eligible for property tax savings. Question?
We have one question. How does this impact individuals who have inherited property that is used as an Airbnb?
The property needs to be owner occupied. So if the entire home is being used as an Airbnb, that is a business.
Okay, and if passed, do you know what the tax revenue allocation is amongst fire protection, schools, and local governments?
I do not know what those allocations would be.
Do you have any other questions for Prop 19 at this point? Okay, we can move on. We'll have time for questions at the end too.
Proposition 20, stricter parole for nonviolent crimes, felony sentences for certain offenses currently treated as misdemeanors. This is a citizens' initiative statute, and it's forwarded by law enforcement agencies. What would Prop 20 do? It limits access to parole programs for some nonviolent offenders who have completed the full term of their primary offense and changes parole rules. It authorizes felony charges for specific theft crimes currently chargeable as misdemeanors, including some theft crimes where the value is between $250 and $950. It requires persons convicted of specified misdemeanors to submit to collection of DNA samples for state database. And it establishes 2 additional types of crime in state code: serial crime and organized retail crime, and charge them as wobblers, which is crimes chargeable as misdemeanors or felonies. How did this get on the ballot? In 2011, the Supreme Court ordered California to reduce the crowding in our prisons. That had resulted from laws such as 3 strikes and other get tough on crime laws. California passed AB 109 in 2011, Prop 47 in 2014, and Prop 57 in 2016 in order to decrease the population in our prisons. AB 109 transferred nonviolent people from prisons to county jails. Prop 47 redefines certain nonviolent felonies to misdemeanors. And Prop 57 increased possibilities for parole for people convicted of nonviolent felonies. This initiative would partly undo these laws. The fiscal bottom line: increases state and local correctional costs in tens of millions of dollars annually, primarily related to increases in county jail population and levels of community supervision. It increases state and local court-related costs that could be more than several million dollars annually. And it may require the building of more prisons with further increased costs. Supporters argue that Prop 20 reclassifies certain crimes with assault, like assault with a deadly weapon, date rape, and child abuse as violent crimes. Prop 20 would not increase the prison population. It would make sure that people serve their entire sentence. Prop 20 would help stop car break-ins, shoplifting, and other thefts that have been on the rise. There are more than 200 organizations and officials that support this proposition, including Assembly members Cooper and Fong, the Orange County Board of Supervisors, and the Association of Los Angeles Deputy Sheriffs. Over $380,000 has been raised in support of this proposition. Opponents argue that Prop 20 will roll back prison reforms and cost taxpayers millions of dollars annually. Prop 20 slashes mental health and rehabilitation programs that help to prepare people for release from prison and reduce repeat offenses. It will result in extreme sentences for petty theft and will disproportionately impact vulnerable minorities. California prison reforms are working. The number of incarcerated adults is decreasing, and California property and violent crime rates are at historic lows. There are 75 organizations and officials who oppose this proposition, including Jerry Brown, SEIU, ACLU, and Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Over $5 million has been raised in opposition. A yes vote for Prop 20 means people who commit certain theft-related crimes could receive increased penalties. Additional factors would be considered for releasing certain inmates from prison early. And law enforcement would be required to collect DNA samples from adults convicted of certain misdemeanors. A no vote means penalties for people who commit certain theft-related crimes would not be increased. No change in the state's process for early prison release. Law enforcement would collect DNA samples from adults only if they are arrested for a felony or required to register as sex offenders or arsonists. Any questions?
I don't see any yet. Oh, here's one. How would a vote on yes cost taxpayers millions of dollars?
Well, it looks like there will be more processing costs and more prisoners in our prison. And we may even have to build new prisons.
Okay, I think that's it for this one.
Prop 21 expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property. This is a citizens initiative statute, and it was forwarded by AIDS Healthcare Foundation. What would Prop 21 do? It modifies Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995, which limits local rent control laws. It allows cities and counties to apply rent control to all housing more than 15 years old, not just housing built before 1995, as is currently the law. Includes single-family homes, except those owned by landlords with just 1 or 2 properties. Allows limits on how much rent can increase with new tenants, capping increases at 15% during the first 3 years of a new tenancy, and continues to require that landlords receive a fair rate of return. So how did this get on the ballot? Well, there's a housing shortage in California, and this has led to increased rents. Many times they're 50% higher than other states. Rent control has been a tool of local governments to make more affordable housing available. The Costa-Hawkins prohibits any rent control on housing built since 1995, excludes all single-family homes, and does not allow any limits on what landlords can charge a new tenant. New state law AB 1482 that expires in 2030 limits rent increases for most rental housing greater than 15 years old to 5% plus inflation or 10%, whichever is lower. Similar measure Prop 10 was defeated in 2018. The fiscal bottom line, value of rental properties would decline because some landlords would opt to sell their properties. Lower assessed valuations of rental properties would mean less paid in property taxes by landlords. Decreased income from rental properties could also lead to a decline in revenue from income taxes. And this could reduce state and local revenues by tens of millions of dollars per year over time. Supporters argue that homelessness is a serious and growing problem. Small increases in rent can force more families into homelessness, which can be a burden on the entire community. The high cost of housing in California leaves many seniors and veterans with too few resources for necessities such as food and medical care. Prop 21 guarantees landlords a fair rate of return. It allows local communities to limit their rent increases and preserve affordable housing. There are 200 organizations and officials who support this proposition, including AIDS Healthcare Foundation, the California Democratic Party, and many labor unions. Over $6 million has been raised to support this proposition. Opponents argue that more than 60% of California voters rejected a nearly identical proposal in 2018. Rent control results in less available and hence less affordable housing. Prop 21 will reduce the number of new housing units built, cost jobs, and hurt the economic recovery. A nonpartisan analysis estimates that if Prop 21 passes, housing values could be reduced by up to 20%. 135 organizations and officials oppose this proposition, including a coalition sponsored by the California Apartment Association, PAC of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, California for Affordable Housing, and Governor Gavin Newsom. Over $44 million has been raised to oppose this proposition. A yes vote for Prop 21 means state law would allow cities and counties to apply more kinds of rent control to more properties than under current law. A no vote means state law would remain current, which limits rent control laws of cities and counties. That it limits the rent control laws that cities and counties can apply.
Okay, so how is a fair rate of return calculated or guaranteed?
Well, there's a formula that they're using, and it's no more than 5%. Is it in here? I'm sorry, I don't know that. I don't know the formula. But what the supporters of this proposition, they're saying that they know what the fair return should be. And I think that goes against, it puts a block on capitalism, where the market decides what costs should be. So the supporters of this are saying that they know what is a fair rate of return.
I don't see any other questions for this prop yet.
One moment, I'm going to open my window now that the noise is gone. It's hot outside. There. All right. Let's move on to Prop 22. This exempts app-based transportation and delivery companies from providing employee benefits to certain drivers. This is a citizens initiative statute, and it was forwarded by app-based companies. What would Prop 22 do? It classifies drivers for app-based transportation, like ride-sharing companies, and delivery companies as independent contractors, not employees. Independent contractor drivers would be entitled to other compensation, including minimum earnings, which is what they're saying is 120% minimum wage, healthcare subsidies, medical expenses if injured. It would also provide anti-discrimination and sexual harassment policies, develop training programs for drivers related to driving, traffic, accident avoidance, and recognizing and reporting sexual assault and misconduct. They would have zero tolerance policies for driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol and require criminal background checks for drivers. They would prohibit drivers from working more than 12 hours in a 24-hour period for a single rideshare or delivery company. How did this get on the ballot? Assembly Bill 5 passed in 2019, and it required that rideshare and delivery companies categorize their workers as employees instead of independent contractors. Rideshare and delivery companies refused to implement the mandates from AB 5. This resulted in a pending court case between the California State Attorney General and violating rideshare and delivery companies in California First District Court of Appeal. If AB 22 passes, it would override AB 5. The fiscal bottom line. There would be a minor increase in state income taxes paid by rideshare and delivery company drivers and investors. It would allow companies to charge lower fares and delivery fees. With lower prices, customers would take more rides and place more orders, and would increase the company's profits, which could increase the company's stock prices. Supporters argue that by a 4-to-1 margin, app-based drivers support maintaining independent contractor status due to time flexibility. AB 5 will result in loss of jobs, longer wait times, significantly higher customer prices, and permanent shutdown of services. This improves app-based work by requiring companies to provide new benefits. Prop 22 creates expanded public safety protections such as background checks and safety courses, zero tolerance for drug and alcohol offenses, and other items. There are over 100 organizations that support this proposition. App-based companies, DoorDash, Lyft, Uber, California Peace Officers Association, California State Sheriff's Association, and California Small Business Association. $182 million plus has been raised to support this proposition. Opponents argue that Prop 22 eliminates basic workplace benefits and replaces them with a new lower payment designed to save the companies money. Companies are already required to perform background checks, but Prop 22 would eliminate required sexual harassment training and investigation of sexual harassment claims. A majority of app-based drivers are full-time, with 70% working 30 hours a week, and they deserve the same treatment as any other employee. 150 organizations and officials are in opposition of this proposition, including the California Labor Federation, California Federation of Teachers, and the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. $44 million has been raised in opposition. A yes vote for Prop 22 means that app-based rideshare and delivery companies could hire drivers as independent contractors. Drivers could decide when, where, and how much work, but would not get standard benefits and protections that businesses must provide employees. A no vote means that app-based rideshare and delivery companies would have to hire drivers as employees, pending the court decision. Drivers would then have less choice about when, where, and how much work, but would get standard benefits and protections that businesses must provide employees.
There's one question. Would a yes vote strike down AB 5?
Yes, it would.
Does Prop 22 also help other independent contractors like freelance writers and other gig workers? Does it appeal AB 5 completely?
That's a good question. This is just for app-based drivers and delivery companies.
If Prop 22 passes, does it completely nullify AB 5, or does it only override AB 5 as it applies to app-based drivers? So I think that might have been a similar question.
Great, let's move on to Prop 22 or 23. Prop 23 establishes state requirements for kidney dialysis clinics and requires on-site medical professional. This is a citizens initiative statute, and it was forwarded by the SEIU UHWW. Prop 23, what would it do? Chronic dialysis clinics would be required to have at least one licensed physician on site during treatment hours. It would be required to report dialysis-related infection data to state and federal governments. It would be prohibited from closing or reducing services without state approval. And it would prohibit from refusing to treat patients based on the source of payment for care, whether it's Medicare, Medi-Cal, or private insurance. How did this get on the ballot? This is the second attempt by the Service Employees International Union, United Healthcare Workers West, to pass legislation as part of the union's effort to unionize the two largest owners of CDCs, DaVita Inc. and Fresenius Medical Care. Prop 8, which was in 2018, whose intent to require dialysis clinics to issue refunds to patients' payers, was rejected by 59.9% of voters. What's the fiscal bottom line? There will be an increase in the cost for the CDCs estimated to be several $100,000 annually on average per CDC for having doctors on site during all treatment hours. If government Entities negotiate higher payment rates, and in addition, if patients need to go to more costly settings like hospitals due to there being fewer CDCs, healthcare costs could go up for state and local governments by the low tens of millions of dollars annually. Supporters say that dialysis is a dangerous procedure, and if something goes wrong, a doctor or highly trained nurse should be nearby. Dialysis patients are prone to infections from their treatments, which can lead to more serious illnesses or death. Proper reporting and transparency of infection rates encourage clinics to improve quality. Strong protections should be provided to vulnerable patients when clinics close. Supporters include the San Diego County Democratic Party and the Service Employees International Union, United Healthcare Workers West. Over $6 million has been raised in support of this proposition. Opponents argue that the increased cost of requiring on-site physicians at every clinic would force clinics to cut services and even close. Full-time on-site physicians are not necessary because dialysis patients are already under the care of their personal kidney physician, and dialysis treatments are administered by specially trained personnel. Proposition 13 could make our physician shortage worse and lead to more emergency room overcrowding. Proposition 23, funded by a special interest group with no expertise in dialysis, is another example of the abuse of our initiative system. There are over 100 organizations in opposition, including DaVita, Fresenius Medical Care, and AMVETS. Over $73 million has been raised in opposition. A yes vote for Prop 23 means that chronic dialysis clinics would be required to have a doctor on site during all patient treatment hours. And a no vote means that chronic dialysis clinics would not be required to have a doctor on site during all patient treatment hours. Any questions? All right, we'll move to Prop 24. This amends consumer privacy laws. The citizens, and is a citizens initiative statute. It was forwarded by Alistair McTaggart. What would Prop 24 do? It amends the 2018 California Privacy Act. It establishes a new California Privacy Protection Agency to replace the California Department of Justice, which is current enforcement. It permits consumers to prevent businesses from sharing personal information, correct inaccurate personal information, and limit businesses' use of sensitive personal information. And it increases penalties and removes the ability of businesses to fix violations before being penalized for violations. How did he get on the ballot? Alistair McTaggart, a San Francisco-based real estate developer, filed this ballot initiative. He was the proponent of a ballot initiative in 2018 that was withdrawn with passage of California Consumer Privacy Act of 2018. He described the CCPA of 2018 as a great baseline, but he thinks that there are additional rights that Californians deserve. If passed, it would require another ballot initiative to amend. The fiscal bottom line, it increases state costs of at least $10 million annually for the new state agency. It increases costs for increased court and Department of Justice enforcement workload. Some or all of these costs will be paid by penalties collected for violations of consumer privacy laws. Unknown impact on state and local tax revenues due to economic effects resulting from new requirements on businesses to protect consumer data. Supporters argue that Prop 24 would prevent businesses from using or sharing sensitive data about our health, finances, race, ethnicity, and precise location. It would strengthen existing protections by establishing a new California Privacy Protection Agency with $10 million a year. By virtue of being a ballot initiative, it is less vulnerable to watering down through the pressure that lobbyists put on legislators. 24 organizations and elected officials are supportive of this proposition, including Californians for Consumer Privacy, Andrew Yang, founder of Humanity Forward, and Alex Rooker with the California Democratic Party. Over $5 million has been raised to support this proposition. Opponents of Prop 24 state that this puts the burden on consumers to opt out of countless intrusive data collection practices, one by one, that companies are currently barred from by default. Hidden economic discrimination persists. People without money to spend cannot pay for loyalty programs, and can expect worse connections, slower downloads, and more pop-up ads. Prop 24 would allow employers to keep gathering data about things like employees' pregnancies, religion, or political activism. 20 organizations oppose this proposition, including the California Nurses Association, ACLU of California, the California Alliance for Retired Americans. $20,000 was raised in opposition. A yes vote for Prop 24 means existing consumer data privacy laws and rights would be expanded. Businesses required to meet privacy requirements would change, and a new state agency would oversee and enforce state consumer privacy rights. A no vote means businesses would continue to be required to follow existing consumer data privacy laws, and consumers would continue to have existing data privacy rights. The state's Department of Justice would continue to oversee and enforce these laws. Any questions on Prop 24?
How soon would businesses be expected to comply with the new privacy laws?
Very good question. I don't know the timing on that, but if this passes, if you see this last bullet point, there would another ballot initiative would be required to amend the current California Consumer Privacy Act. So that might be in the next election cycle. All right, let's move on to Prop 25. This is a referendum on law that replaced money bail with system-based. This is a referendum on a law that replaced money bail with system, based on public safety and flight risk. This is a veto referendum. It was forwarded by the bail bond companies. What would Prop 25 do? Proposition 25 would eliminate the current money bail system and replace it with a system based on risk assessment to determine whether a person charged with a crime would be released from jail while awaiting trial. High risk and medium risk people not released would remain in jail until arraignment. If passed, referendum Proposition 25 would allow SB 10 legislation to move forward, and this was passed in 2018. This would defeat the veto referendum. How did this get on the ballot? The veto referendum was funded by the Californians Against the Reckless Bail Scheme, a PAC primarily composed of bail bond companies. In 2018, the California State Legislature passed SB 10, which would eliminate the money bail system so that people arrested or arraigned in court might not have to post bail in order to stay free pending their trial. SB 10 did not go into effect because the veto referendum was filed. What is the fiscal bottom line? The new release process would increase the workload for state trial courts, district attorneys, and public defenders. These costs could be in hundreds of millions of dollars annually. There would be possible reduced jail costs if fewer people are being held in jail or for shorter periods of time. The actual size of these effects is uncertain and would depend on how the proposition is interpreted and implemented. There would be reduced fees paid to the state on bail bonds. Supporters argue that the current system favors rich defendants who can easily make bail and keep poor defendants and defendants of color in jail. People who are eventually found not guilty or even charged may be stuck with large debts to pay off the bail or the fees. Wealthy inequity currently is a huge factor in determining who is able to make bail and who has to remain in jail awaiting trial. There are 74 organizations and elected officials in support of this proposition: A New Way of Life, Anti-Recidivism Coalition, California Federation of Teachers, and California Democratic Party. Opponents argue that the intentions of SB 10 are good, but its provisions may effectively result in more people being jailed than under the current situation. Prop 25 will cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars a year, overburdening courts and creating a new bureaucracy. 120 organizations are in opposition, including Aladdin Bail Bonds, AIA Surety Bail Bonds, California Bail Agents Association, California Black Chamber of Commerce, California Peace Officers Association, and California State Conference of the NAACP. Over $5 million has been raised in opposition. The yes vote on Prop 25 is to uphold the contested legislation SB 10, which would replace cash bail with risk assessments for detained suspects awaiting trials. California would be the first state to implement this kind of bond policy. A no vote is to repeal the contested legislation, Senate Bill 10, thus keeping in place the use of cash bail for detained suspects awaiting trials. Questions?
One question: is there a delineation on the small to medium crimes that people would be held for?
I don't have that. Sorry. Other questions?
Any other questions for 25?
All right, let's move on to the City of San Diego propositions. And as I said earlier, all of these measures were put forward by the City Council after going through their committee council or the City Committee process. So let's get right into it here. Measure A, issuance of affordable housing bonds. It's proposed by the San Diego Housing Federation, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. What would Measure A do? Increase property taxes on real property in the city of San Diego to secure up to $900 million in bonds to be issued by the city. Bond proceeds would be used to provide as many as 7,500 affordable housing units for vulnerable populations. And bond proceeds would be leveraged by attracting private and public matching funds up to $3.6 billion from state and federal sources. How did this get on the ballot? San Diego has a severe shortage of affordable housing and housing for the homeless. Almost 200,000 homes are in extremely low income to low income categories. The majority of these households are paying more than 50% for housing. The gap is growing as the supply of naturally occurring affordable housing continues to shrink. City of San Diego approved Measure A be placed on the ballot for the citizens to vote. As I said, it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. What's the fiscal bottom line? Annual tax is estimated to be $3.14 per $100,000 of assessed property value, or $21.33 for a median value home of $679,000. If additional taxable bonds were to be used to reach the maximum bond authorization of $900 million, the annual tax would increase to $20.85 per 100,000 of assessed property value in 2020, or $141.54 annually for a median value home. Supporters argue that this would allow San Diego to provide a long-term policy to address homelessness and also provide affordable homes so that hardworking San Diego families can afford to stay in San Diego. It would generate local funds needed to match millions in federal and state matching funds that San Diego currently cannot access. It would create safe, clean, and healthy homes for low-income seniors, veterans, and those with mental health and physical related disabilities. And it would provide affordable homes near jobs for low-income families. Supporters include the Regional Task Force on the Homeless, Casa Familiar, Council Member Chris Ward, Dr. Jim Dunford, Emergency Medical Services, and Deacon June Vargas from Father Joe's Village. Opponents argue that in just the first 5 years of Measure A, the average homeowner will see their property increase by $500 or more. Taxpayers will be on the hook to pay for this property tax increase for more than 40 years. San Diego already has the highest property tax rate in the county, and too many working families are struggling with the high cost of living. Measure A fails to protect taxpayers by refusing to ban controversial project labor agreements and discriminate against non-union firms, which are predominantly small, veteran-owned, and minority-owned businesses. Recent studies have shown that the projects that would be funded by Measure A have been riddled by wasteful spending and financial mismanagement. Opponents include Carl DeMaio, the chairman of Reform California, and Councilmember Kate and Sherman from the city, and Richard Ryder, chair of the San Diego Tax Fighters. A yes vote on Measure A would authorize the issuance and sale of up to $900 million of general obligation bonds secured by new taxes on real property located within the city of San Diego to provide affordable housing. A no vote means we would not authorize the issuance and sale of the bonds or the related tax. Questions?
What's the assurance that these funds go to affordable housing that is built to completion and is still considered affordable? What is the timing on building these developments?
Well, as the bond money becomes available, that will dictate how many homes can be built. There's going to be a committee that's housed at the San Diego Housing Commission that will be monitoring these funds.
Okay, the city of San Diego recently tripled its spending on the homeless crisis to $300 million annually, which is $66,000 per homeless individual per year. Is Measure A funding on top of this?
Yes, it would. This is a bond measure, so this would be on top of that. And the challenge is really to get our most vulnerable populations into permanent homes. A lot, and I'm not being an advocate for this one way or another, but so many of our services are short-term, and we need more permanent, affordable homes and apartments with services to support our most vulnerable populations, to help keep them in their homes and have them stabilize in their situations. So this would actually build 7,500 affordable apartments across the city. All right, I'll move on to Measure B. Independent Commission on Police Practices. This was introduced to City Council by Women Occupy San Diego. What does this Measure B do? It amends the City of San Diego Charter to dissolve the Community Review Board on Police Practices and establish an Independent Commission on Police Practices that would be appointed by the City Council. It would investigate office-involved shootings and deaths from interaction with a police officer, or while a person is in custody of the San Diego Police Department. And it would review and evaluate all complaints against city police officers and grant subpoena powers and would be allowed to hire outside experts, including attorneys. How did this get on the ballot? Current Community Review Board on Police Practices does not independently investigate any reported incidents, nor does it have subpoena power or the use of outside experts. For legal questions, this board refers to the city attorney. Current Citizens Advisory Board or Police Community Relations, whose purpose is to study, understand, and recommend changes related to the San Diego Police Department. This also refers to the city. They also refer to the city attorney. Board members for both groups are appointed by the mayor plus a majority vote of the city council. The fiscal bottom line is estimated that the necessary staffing and budget for the commission could range from $1.2 million annually up to $2.6 million. Current funding for the Citizens Review Board at approximately $240,000 would no longer be required, resulting in a net cost of $950,000 to $2.35 million annually. Funding would come from the city's general fund. Supporters argue that the Independent Commission on Police Practices will be able to hire outside experts, including attorneys. They will not need to depend on the city attorney, who also represents the mayor and the San Diego Police Department. The charter amendments will allow for independent experts to investigate claims of police misconduct and grant the commission subpoena power to obtain witness testimony and documents, enforceable through contempt proceedings under state law. Supporters include San Diegans for Justice, Women Occupy San Diego, NAACP San Diego, Center for Policy Initiatives, and the ACLU. And there are no opponents that were filed with the Office of the City Clerk. A yes vote on Measure B amends the city's charter to replace the Community Review Board on Police Practices with the Commission on Police Practices that would be appointed by the City Council. A no vote means that maintaining the community review board on police practices with no subpoena power or use of outside attorneys and experts. Questions? All right, moving to Measure C. Establish district-only elections for members of the Board of Education of the City of the San Diego Unified School District. This was proposed by Parents for Quality Education, a citizens organization. What will Measure C do? It replaces language referring to registered voters of the whole San Diego Unified School District with language referring to registered voters of each Board of Education district. And it will provide a district-only process for electing school board members that is the same as the process used to elect city council members. How did this get on the ballot? The current citywide school district elections process was adopted in 1931 when San Diego had 125,000 residents. Members of the public submitted ballot measure proposals for consideration by the City Council, which voted to place the measure on the ballot. And it was submitted only to those voters who are registered to vote within school district boundaries. The fiscal bottom line would result in a relatively small reduction in election costs for the school district. Supporters argue that at-large elections weaken the representation of small groups, especially people of color that don't have a citywide base, and allow special interests to elect their preferred candidate. Measure C will reduce the time candidates spend on fundraising to remain competitive in citywide races, allowing them to focus on delivering solutions to parents, students, and their communities. The current election process does not result in a board reflecting the diversity of the district, but district-only elections assure voters fairer representation. Supporters include Tom Kiloney, President of the Parents for Quality Education, Councilmember Chris Cate, and Councilwoman Monica Montgomery, Ellen Nash, who's the chair of the Black American Political Association of California, and Wendell Bass, who's a retired principal. Opponents argue that the present system balances community needs and larger concerns by ensuring every board member cares about all the kids in every neighborhood in San Diego Unified. District-only elections can be dominated by big money special interests who will be able to elect board members who are beholden to them. Special interests who want to privatize public education are behind Measure C. The 5 districts are likely to be unbalanced with low-income neighborhoods grouped into 1 or 2 districts. And vote-rich areas will be able to elect a board majority and dominate school funding and other educational decisions. Opponents include Scott Barnett, who is the president of the San Diego Taxpayers Advocate. He's a San Diego taxpayer advocate and a former executive director for the San Diego Taxpayers Association. Dr. Kyra Green, policy advocate for working families. Amy Denhart, elected parent leader, San Diego High School. Tammy Reyna, San Diego County Teacher of the Year. And Frank Jordan, past president of the San Diego and California NAACP. A yes vote on Measure C means amending the charter to elect school board members by voters from their respective districts. A no vote means the existing law remains unchanged and school board members are elected citywide. Questions? All right. Moving on to Measure D. Procedures for filling vacancies, removal for cause, and succession to office for members of the San Diego Unified School District Board of Education. This is endorsed by the San Diego Unified School Board. Measure D would amend the city charter to bring members of the school board under city laws that provide procedures to remove elected officials for cause, to fill vacancies, and to govern succession to the office. School board members will be governed by vacancy, removal, and succession laws similar to those already in place for the mayor, city council, city attorney, and council members. We get on the ballot because currently the city charter includes election procedures when there is a vacancy on the school board, but it does not define what constitutes a vacancy, nor does it provide for the removal of school board members. An incident in 2019 brought to the attention of the San Diego City Council that there is no procedure in place to remove a board member. There's no fiscal impact associated with these charter amendments. Supporters argue that the city charter should protect the public from politicians who abuse their office by committing serious crimes or failing to perform their duties. City charter amendments incorporate best practices used by other major cities regarding the removal of elected officials. And this measure reduces the need for a costly and time-consuming recall if a board member refuses to resign. Supporters include council members Kate and Moreno, retired City Heights teacher Ricardo Daniel Castillo, and Francine Maxwell, president of the NAACP San Diego branch. There are no arguments there are no opponents or arguments against this measure. A yes vote of Measure D means amending the charter to bring San Diego Unified School District board members under existing laws, providing procedures to remove elected officials for cause, to fill vacancies, and to govern succession to the office. And a no vote means the San Diego City Charter shall not be amended. Questions? Measure D. All right, moving on to Measure E, our last item of discussion. The Midway District height limit exemption, and it was introduced by council members Chris Kate and Jen Campbell. What does Measure E do? It amends the San Diego Municipal Code to exclude the Midway Pacific Highway Community Plan area from the existing 30-foot height limit on buildings. It does leave in place the existing municipal code height requirements, which vary per parcel. How to get on the ballot? Voters in the city of San Diego approved a citizens initiative measure in 1972 that limited the height of buildings in the city to 30 feet in the coastal zone. Community members of the Midway Pacific area feel that needed rejuvenation is hampered by the height limitation. The exemption would allow for development in the area. There's no fiscal impact associated with this amendment. Supporters argue that Prop D back in the 70s was intended to prevent Miami-style high-rises erected along the waterfront. Midway is certainly not an ocean view corridor. Measure E will revitalize the dilapidated Midway area, helping struggling San Diegans get back to work and create a vibrant neighborhood San Diego families can enjoy. Supporters include council members Kate and Campbell, the Midway Pacific Highway Community Planning Group, and Nicole Capret's Climate Action Campaign. Opponents argued that Measure E could be the first step toward San Diego lifting the height limit in the rest of the coastal zone, which includes La Jolla, Pacific Beach, Ocean Beach, Midway, Mission Beach, and Point Loma. The community plan for this project area describes 1,324 acres total, of which only 344 acres are private property. The remaining 980 acres are public land and public rights of way. We can have a vast greenbelt park of sports fields, recreation areas, and a restored stretch of San Diego River for kayak and paddleboard journeys to San Diego Bay. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to convert a 200 plus acres to park. Opponents include James Lamattery of Raise the Balloon, John McNabb, Save Our Access, Ronan Gray, Save San Diego Neighborhoods, and Alex Leondis, the chairman of the 1972 Coastal Height Limit Initiative. A yes vote means allowing construction of buildings over 30 feet tall in the Midway Pacific Highway Community Plan area. A no vote means continuing the 30-foot height limit for the Midway Highway Community Plan area. Questions?
There's a question, can you show the map again?
So can you see this, the cursor? Here's Pacific Highway along here. Here's Marine Corps Recruit Depot, MCRD. And here is the business district. But this is all the Midway Pacific Highway community planning area. The Old Town Trolley Station is right here. And there is a new Union Station or Grand Central Station being planned. I think it's right here, but that will be in the future. Other questions?
Any other questions on Measure E before we circle back to some of the earlier props? Okay, feel free to keep submitting your questions. We have a few from earlier propositions. So there's two for Prop 15. The first question is, so even if the purpose of the property is residential, if the market value of the overall property, whether it's an apartment complex or mansion, is at 3 million or more, and it's rented out, then the owner's property tax could go up?
Yes, if it's rented out.
Okay, and the next question on Prop 15, does it require the money to go directly to schools, or does it go to the general fund?
It gets divided between, after the expenses are paid to implement Prop 15, the balance is divided 60-40, schools and community. The balance goes to those two groups.
Okay, and then the last question was for Prop 17. For the parole prop, do they have to pay all of their fees in order to be able to register to vote?
Pay their fees. What fees?
I'm assuming as part of any like restitution or anything that they may owe.
Oh, if they have fines? Is that?
Okay, do you want to clarify your question?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't read anything on paying the fines. Oh, there's a lot of slides here. So that might require a little diving in a little deeper with some of our expert resources.
Okay, so if you're interested in these slides, I'm putting the email you can send your request to, and we will get that to you within the next couple of days. Okay, anyone have any other questions on the propositions or any other general questions? Okay, so I'm going to. Okay, so Mary, is that all of your information?
That concludes my very long presentation.
Thank you so much for your time and for everything that you and the League of Women Voters do to gather all this information for us. We really appreciate your time, and I think trying to see if there's any other questions. Okay. So I just want to thank our speakers again. Thank you so much to Mary and the League of Women Voters for taking the time to give us all of this helpful information. Also, thank you to Andrea and Elo for opening the evening with your remarks tonight. And thank you to the SPAC team that worked hard to put the event together. And thank you all for participating. And here's just a couple quotes to send you off into the evening. Someone struggled for your right to vote, use it. Every election is determined by the people who show up. So thank you so much for all of your time, Mary, and I hope you all have a good evening.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.